in this new decade, a user experience is going to take precedence over product and quality. And that's going to make brands stand out from the competition, right? And as the identity space is getting more cluttered, solutions which can be interoperable and which can enhance user experience will define the future of these products or solutions.
Welcome to Hedera Hashgraph's Gossip About Gossip. If you are a developer, an entrepreneur, crypto enthusiast, or just trying to learn more about how distributed ledger technology and Hedera Hashgraph will impact your industry, then you'll love the episodes that we have coming up. Bookmark us, add us to your podcast app, and stay tuned.
Hey there, I'm Paul Madsen, and welcome to Hedera Hashgraph Gossip About Gossip. Before Hedera, before Hashgraph, before DLTs, I came from the identity management space, where I spent a number of years working on identity standards, particularly in the federated identity space, standards like SAML and OpenID Connect, OAuth to some extent, which is why I've always followed with interest the so-called self-sovereign or decentralized identity architectures and models, which argue the value of a DLT, like Hedera or otherwise, for to some extent disintermediating the participants in the identity flows, if you will. Which is why I'm excited today to be interviewing two members of the EarthID team. EarthID is a decentralized identity platform building on Hedera, and I'm happy today to be talking to Sharat, Chandra, and Vishal Dharmawat from the EarthID team. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, this is Vishal here, and I work as one of the chief architects for EarthID. And I have Sharat with me. Sharat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Vishal, and thanks, Paul, for having me on the show. It's great to be connected with Paul and talk about identity and how EarthID is revolutionizing the identity space across the globe.
Yeah, we've been connected on Twitter for some time, so it's nice to chat. So EarthID is a decentralized identity platform that promises to empower users. How so? What are we doing to empower users different in this new model?
So like you just mentioned initially, Paul, this is one of its own kind of self-sovereign identity. When we give the user back the power of controlling their own data or their own PII, as opposed to the normal flow of data wherein whenever you register somewhere, you have to actually give away your data and those platforms monetize on top of that. But over here, you have the control of the data, what you want to share and till what extent or till what timeline do you want to share that data with those people or those platforms. And apart from that, it is also a kind of self-sovereign identity. We call it EarthID because we try to make sure that an EarthID which is generated for, let's say, Paul Madsen is unique. Paul Madsen cannot create another EarthID and create duplicates on this platform. So this serves as also a KYC for your identity.
So I definitely want to come back to that uniqueness characteristic, as implied by my EarthID, implying a single one. Let's come back to that. So if EarthID is an identity platform built on Hedera, what is Hedera providing to EarthID? What's the value of a DLT in decentralized identity if as you described it, it's ultimately just about giving users control?
We look at it as a two-way opportunity. It's not just the power to the users, but also a sense of completeness for the other platforms. Whatever the information that a user provides, we encrypt and keep a hash of it on the DLT. So in this case, we are using Hedera, and I'll come to why Hedera soon. That information, when the user is actually giving away or sending it across to someone, they can also validate in the same way that whatever information that the user is providing is actually accurate information. So if I am providing my information that my name is Vishal Dharmawat, that is something that I can validate using a blockchain or a DLT, in this case Hadera, in a very unique way.
Yeah, the way I think of it, when you present a credential that says you're Vishal to some site, whether it's a bank and it's a KYC scenario or otherwise, they've got a number of checks to perform. First is, was the credential issued to the users who's actually presenting it to the bank? And you can do that with a digital signature. Do they trust the issuer of that credential? Kind of more of a business check. But they also want to be sure that the credential hasn't subsequently been revoked between the time it was issued, which could be years in the past, and today when it's being presented. And that's what the DLT enables, that sort of lookup and revocation check.
That's correct. And just to add to your statement over here, is that since you are using a DLT, it gives a timestamp finality of when the validation was done. And if there are subsequent updates or changes to that record, it also gives a ledger of all those changes as well. So for background verification, you not only have the final data set, but you also have a timeline of what all data changes have occurred through. So It's a very, very good use case for banks, even in case of credit management. What right now happens is they get the final credit score, but using a DLT, they can actually see the progress of the user and can take a much better call on loan issue or any other use case.
That's very interesting, right? That sounds like the typical provenance use case that all DLTs aspire to, but applied to identity. So as you say, you don't just get the current KYC status, but you get the history and perhaps how that user built up that credit rating or comparable. Is that part of what EarthID calls the trust score?
That's correct. Yes.
So that a relying party gets this bigger picture of a user's identity.
Right. So I'll just touch a bit briefly on what the trust score is. When you're creating your EarthID, at that point in time, we generally do not have too much of data. And that's where we also try to validate and verify the data that you've sent. So a very, very basic use case over here, just for understanding purposes, would be that if you're providing an email ID or mobile number, we'll verify that email ID and mobile number by sending some kind of OTP that you confirm that you've received the OTP, thereby confirming that it's your own email ID or not a garbage email ID or a garbage phone number. So that's how you keep increasing your trust score. So from the time you've created your EarthID and from the time your trust score has been increasing, you kind of get a timeline that, let's say if you started the process on 1st of Jan and you've done all these steps and you've taken a month. So that kind of gives a different view or a different picture for the third party platform as to, are they fine with that, or is that something that they want to look into, why it took 1 month, or how many iterations they had to go through to do that completion or to do that verification, to give them a sense that is it a bogus user or a credential.
Because there would be some patterns in the development of that provenance that would be indicative of fraud. Something happened too quick or too slow, etc.
Yeah, some kind of anomaly detection.
Cool. Sharat, how did EarthID come to be?
I lead the Government Blockchain Association India chapter, and as part of the association, we have an identity working group as well. And EarthID was one of the projects which Shiv was driving, the co-founder of EarthID. So I got in touch with Shiv and came to know about EarthID and the potential it promises. And that's how we thought, why not try and implement this within GBA as well. So we have plans to roll EarthID as one of the identity management solutions for all GBA members and all GBA chapters across the globe.
That's very cool. What's the connection between this identity working group within the GBA and other identity initiatives, Decentralized Identity Foundation, the work in the W3C, et cetera? Is everybody talking to everybody?
There's no direct link, but again, the idea is to come up with a standard which can support or complement the already existing standards, let's say W3C or DID, right?
Right. What's the business model for EarthID?
we are trying to scale adoption through B2B model. So we are talking to some of the corporates in India, the fintech players mainly, and how they can use the digital KYC part of it to make their user experience better. Because in this new decade, a user experience is going to take precedence over product and quality. And that's going to make brands stand out from the competition, right? And as the identity space is getting more cluttered, solutions which can be interoperable and which can enhance user experience will define the future of these products or solutions.
Very cool. Vishal, you indicated that what is being stored on Hedera is the hash of some credential or some other identity artifact. Yeah. Have you been considering the relevance of the Hedera consensus service model as yes, to some extent an alternative binding to Hedera?
Yes. At the time of the inception of my EarthID as an idea, when we were approached to do the development, at that point of time, HCS was not actually into the picture. So it was all more smart contract driven. But now with HCS coming in, we are looking at it from HCS perspective as well, because really speaking, this is more HCS suitable idea rather than a smart contract suitable idea. For the fact that there are a lot of data points about the user that you want to keep, and storing it on a smart contract kind of becomes a tedious job, and there is not too much of control per se on a smart contract level that you require. Some features that smart contract give out of the box is that it can be programmed to do certain steps, which I think we can leverage the same thing with HCS as well. And given that HCS has much more channeled approach, wherein you can create actually establish a topic or a channel between, as a user, between yourself and the third party to which you want to actually provide the data. So it becomes a much more secure channeled medium versus what we do currently, wherein we have to the user and the third party agree upon a solve to encrypt the data and then hash it and keep it on the blockchain or the Hedera network. So that extra step or that additional step can be brought down considerably with HCS. So yes, as soon as we get some access to HCS, we would start actually migrating the system or the architecture to use more HCS, because that was also one of the use cases that we were trying to, when we were architecting this entire solution, was to use some kind of private chain, let's say Hyperledger Fabric, to keep the data or records of the physical records basically of the users, let's say the government identity or anything, which they don't want to basically expose it on the public network, and use the public network just to keep a hash of all those records, or rather an encrypted hash where the salt is also divided between the user and the EarthID, so none of them can actually decrypt it without anybody's consent. So it's more like a multi-signature hash, you can say.
So as you described the model, it's not just the issuance of a credential that is recorded to the ledger as a hash, but as you described it, it's all the subsequent touch points where that credential is either used perhaps or refined or updated or revoked, which implies, especially if we have millions and billions of identities, which implies the need for a throughput and a capacity that a smart contract probably couldn't support. But the HCS model removes from Hedera all that burden except for calculating consensus timestamps and orders. As you described, you can keep those records on a Hyperledger or some other private ledger or just an application network, and rely on Hedera just for the ordering, and so probably achieve the necessary throughputs.
Exactly. So over here, like you just mentioned, the timestamp or rather the timeline of events is of essence more than the computation of how we are getting it, and that is something that Hedera with HCS gives you out of the box. So it takes up all the heavy lifting of maintaining the ordering and the fairness, which is kind of the backbone for this application, or I should say for any other dApps as well. Specifically speaking about self-sovereign identity, wherein the ordering of events is also of very much importance, HCS definitely becomes a very, very good fit. And that is why we would basically want to port the system slowly and gradually to HCS, or not slowly, but as soon as possible, rather.
Right. And you touched on some of the privacy advantages of the HCS model as well. There was a recent report I was just reading this morning from the European Parliament about, the challenges of a public network like Hedera for GDPR. But if we don't persist anything on that public network, as in the HCS model, then those privacy challenges become much more manageable.
Right, and that is something that we have actually tried and achieved when we came across HCS. When HCS was rather introduced to the world, it was an amazing concept, an amazing idea. With that, it was also like, if you go back to the webinar, Mr. Lehman, he did mention about the memo field. Using memo field, you can mimic what HCS tries to do at a very, very basic level, or an MVP level, you can say. And that is something that we tried and we did in a couple of products apart from EarthID. And we were successful in doing that because, like you just mentioned, I just want to keep a timestamp or a finality record and a particular value, which is, let's say, the hash of the data for which I want consensus. So that's the only thing that HCS or Hedera's memo field is taking care of. But all the business logic is still with you. So you get the flexibility of not just tying yourself or tightly coupling yourself to a smart contract, but also going to a very basic example like a traditional database, just introducing a new column into your database which says timestamp, and that is your actual Hedera timestamp. If that changes, then the row itself is mutated. If not, then you can actually achieve a DLT with a very basic database or RDB.
Right. It's great to hear that you were able to successfully test with the memo field, because as you indicated, to some extent, the HCS just normalizes and refines that model. Sharat, I know that KYC is an important use case for EarthID. What others?
So our future product roadmap also involves the usage of a blockchain wallet for making payments. So once a digital KYC is done for a user, the next step would be to get him to make payments using the blockchain wallet. And this is a real problem which this blockchain wallet can solve. So as of now, most of the people in India, they have their wallets, or the payment wallets have been hacked, right? With DLT, the security part comes into picture, and such hacks can be prevented. Apart from bringing in a seamless KYC solution to the users, we can also empower them to make payments seamlessly across different platforms.
Is the premise that once a user is KYC, then to some extent that KYC identity is bound to a crypto account and so can be validated on subsequent payments?
Not necessarily crypto payments, but also for the utility payments.
Cool.
Right. Because in India, the regulation isn't so favorable towards the crypto payments, but mostly, let's say, I want to make a payment for, let's say, my next Uber ride, right? So you can make the payment using the blockchain wallet itself.
Okay.
It is more secure, right?
Right. Yeah. And the ledger just, quote unquote, becomes that source of provenance that Vishal described.
Yeah.
Very cool. Gentlemen, I look forward to seeing EarthID continue to evolve on Hadera. But before we wrap up, I wanted to congratulate you because I came across a headline that EarthID won an award recently. Fourth edition of the India FinTech Awards, EarthID won an award for best use of blockchain. That's great to hear.
That was a great development for us. And in fact, it was the market validation for our solution. So our eKYC solution is getting acceptance by people in the fintech space. And we were lucky and fortunate to bag that award from the industry body itself, the National Payments Corporation of India.
Yeah, great to hear. Congratulations again. Gentlemen, thank you again. This was a great chat. As I said, I look forward to seeing what EarthID builds and how Hedera can help.
Thanks, Paul.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for hosting us. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Hedera Hashgraph's Gossip About Gossip. If you liked the episode, please subscribe, rate and review, and also share and tell your friends.
Or connect with us on social media like Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Hashgraph, particularly if you want to leave us feedback on the podcast. We look forward to hearing from you.